Good morning. It's Monday in Manhattan. I'm Jared Wassinger, Assistant to the City Manager, here with Wyatt Thompson, Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation, and Alfonso Leyva, our Park Planner. We're at Warner Memorial Park. We're doing it a little bit different. We're not live today because we want to hit multiple locations of this multiple acre park because the City Commission is going to be having a work session tomorrow to go over the master plan. It's been quite a few years since we've been doing this master plan. We've brought it to the Park Board, the City Commission a few times, and then today we're going to be going back, or tomorrow we're going to be going back to the City Commission to discuss more options about the master plan, what we want this park to become. First, Wyatt, I'd like to get a little understanding of just the history of the park and its current uses.
Sure, yeah, so Warner Memorial Park, it's 89 acres. The original 80 acres were originally given to the city back in 1957. I guess I should say 50 acres were given to the city by Kern Warner, who was the property owner, and then the city, through donations from the public, was able to purchase the other 30 acres. So 80, and then a few more acres were added over the years to get us to the 89. It's a beautiful prairie park. It's got some woodland areas. It has trails. It has a 9-hole disc golf course, and the cross-country teams run their meets out here. And it's just a great place in the middle of the city to get out and enjoy the landscape.
Yep. And we've done a kind of a master planning process. Alfonso, how many years has it been since we kind of started this? And then we got some neighborhood input, and then we got some community input, and then kind of give us a little understanding of the process that we've gone through currently to get us to today.
Yeah, since the city has acquired the property, there's been multiple master plans, but this process started, it kind of stemmed from the local disc golf club who in 2010, after putting in the 9-hole disc golf course, they wanted to expand it, and they'd go to the park board, they go to the commission, and they were continuously asking for this expansion. Well, they were finally heard, and before that expansion was to occur, we needed to go through the master plan process to kind of get the input from the community and see what else we could do within Warner Park. Not only expanding the park, but getting a little bit more use for Warner Memorial Park.
Good deal. And that'll be considered tomorrow by the City Commission. We're going to go to a couple of sites around the park here today and go a little bit into detail about the disc golf course, some of the trails, and some of the unique aspects of the master plan.
Yep.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, so we're at the southwest corner of Warner Park. Just a reminder on how to get here. We're in the parking lot area, and when you're on K18 and you take the Miller Park exit, you get onto Arbor Lane, and then you get onto Warner Park Road, and that meets you here. Right now, the park's closed to vehicular traffic throughout the park. But you can't really tell from here, but this road kind of extends all the way to the northern edge of the park. And there's a shelter up there, and then more access to trails and a pond. So tell us a little bit about the master plan concepts that you guys are looking at to possibly open this to traffic, and what that would mean for the community.
Yeah, so this roadway is a part of the original plan for the park back in 1957, 58, and it was built in the late 50s, early 60s, and at one point in time you could drive from Warner Park Road all the way into the park, and there were picnic areas and parking spots, and people came out and enjoyed the afternoon or the day. Originally the park was a couple miles outside the city, so that was an important aspect of the park, to be able to drive here and enjoy the park and then leave. In the early 90s or so, there were a lot of concerns about people driving off-road, vandalism, parties in the park that the police couldn't necessarily control very well because of the limited access and the remoteness of the park. And so this gate was installed to prevent vehicle access into the park any further than this parking lot.
Yep. But folks can actually go to the Parks and Recreation Department to get a key to possibly reserve the park if they want to use the shelter up there, and then they can open the gate and get back there currently right now?
Correct, yeah. We have a process where people can check out a key, they could open the gate, drive in, close the gate behind them, go to do their activity if they're reserving a shelter for a picnic, and then do the same process and lock it back up on their way out.
And then Alfonso, the City Commission tomorrow, they're going to consider multiple options maybe when it comes to opening up this roadway. considering opening up the whole roadway or part of it?
Yeah, so last year when we started the whole master plan process, we had Coralberry. That was one of the concepts that we took out to the community. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board reviewed it, as well as the City Commission in that work session. There was quite a bit of opposition of actually opening up this road as part of the master plan. People still didn't want to have that, well, residents didn't want to have that access in there because a lot of them do remember that activity that occurred. But then when we went to the City Commission, there was a couple of comments stating that they'd like to see options of opening up the road. Maybe it's not the whole road, maybe it's just partial to where the existing shelter is, but that's what we're going to be reviewing tomorrow with the City Commission.
Okay. Now we're going to head to the disc golf course.
That's the next stop.
All right. Okay, so we're at the kind of the northeast corner of Warner Park now. We are much closer to Target, right beyond those trees over there. It's a different kind of access road that we took than Warner Park Road, but we made it here. We're at one of the practice holes right now. For those maybe unfamiliar with what disc golf is, it's much like the regular game of golf. You have a frisbee, a tee box. You try and get it in one of those baskets in as little amount of throws as possible. We have a 9-hole course here. City maintained course within Warner Park, but we've gone through some master planning processes to expand to 18 holes. Alfonso, is that correct?
Yes, and then actually when this was first implemented, there was a lot of help from the local disc golf club as well. They provided some of the materials, and then city crews helped with the installation.
Okay. And with the expansion of looking at 18 holes, we are looking at multiple areas of the park. Have we gone with different layouts? Are we expanding towards this way, that way? Where are we going with this?
Yeah, with the proposed, with that first Coralberry concept, what was proposed was kind of looping this a little bit better, rearranging these 9 holes here, but then looping it here to the northwest side. It would extend a little bit into where the cross-country route is contained, and that was some of the concern from the residents, was that interaction with those two activities. But it does take up a little bit of that park. There's some of it does get close to some of the property, and that was also one of the other concerns that we heard.
We're going to have to move any trails with the adding of the 9 extra holes. Are we going to kind of reconfigure the layout, possibly redo some of this area to accommodate that?
Well, some of the parameters in the design of the disc golf course expansion was trying to avoid crossing any of the trails. Old Military Trail is staying where it's at.
Okay.
We're not interacting with that or crossing it with any of the holes. And there may be some options that we could do some work around with the existing Boy Scout trail, with some of the options that we're going to see tomorrow.
80 acres is a lot of land. A lot of people kind of think these are 2 separate parks almost sometimes because of the vastness of this park and how disc golf is kind of separated from those existing cross-country trails. We are kind of adjacent to a neighborhood. I know there's been some concerns about expanding the course, maybe more foot traffic. Has that been brought up? Do you anticipate that to be a topic of discussion at the City Commission meeting?
Sure. We've heard from residents throughout the master planning process, at the park board, at the previous City Commission meeting, that they have some concerns about expanding the disc golf footprint within the park and just how that course might lay out, how the development of the course would affect the native kind of feel of the park. Would we be removing trees or changing things in terms of its natural state? And our goal would be, if the course moves forward and we expand to 18, that the goal of any design would be to work with that topography, to work with that vegetation, use the trees as part of the course, not take them all out so that we can have wide open spaces. It's a very process that would allow us to work with that existing vegetation.
And then my understanding is that we've looked at multiple other sites. When we were back last year with the City Commission and the Park Board discussing expanding disc golf to 18 holes, one of the options was, before we, adopt this master plan and expand this course, they wanted city staff to maybe look at some other sites to expand disc golf. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we presented to the City Commission back in November at a work session, they didn't want to make any kind of decision. They wanted a little bit more information, a little bit more analysis of some of our properties to see if Warner Memorial Park is suitable for an expansion. And so we went back and looked at 10 different properties that the city owns. It's a mix. There's a property that K-State owns, and then one that Riley County owns. But we looked at these 10 properties and had about 7 or 8 parameters that we looked at and scored them. And the way that everything ranks is Warner Memorial Park is the most suitable, with Fairmont Park second, and Northeast Park is third.
Okay. So I think we're gonna go off into some of these trails here right off the disc golf course. All right, and lastly, we're at Military Trail. We just parked at the disc golf parking lot. We're off of Schuss Road, which, if people are unfamiliar with that, when you're at the intersection of Seth Child and Southwind, which gets you into kind of the Seth Child Commons, you would kind of take a right off of Southwind towards Arby's, and then you'd kind of loop around Arby's. You get onto Schuss Road here, park over here, and then we just came down to Military Trail, and there's a lot of history behind this trail in there, Wyatt.
There is, yeah. So the Military Trail in the park follows the old Military Road, which was a road that connected Fort Leavenworth to Fort Riley back in the 1800s as Kansas was being settled and they were moving troops and people, settlers, into this area.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, this trail leads to many other trails through the trees here in Warner Park. There are multiple, right? And then this is kind of part of also the discussed expansion for the disc golf course.
Yeah, so we're actually on the Military Trail / the Scout Trail at this point. Okay. As you head further down the trail, they kind of diverge, and the Military Trail heads off kind of southwest, and the Scout Trail keeps heading straight west. And there's some cool structures that have been built by Boy Scouts and things that are, hence the name, and that'll connect you into the bigger trail system throughout the rest of the park.
And then are there any other historical sites or artifacts that you've looked into when doing the master plan here at Warner Park?
Yeah, there's some interesting historical stories. We haven't found any sites, but if you read the historical records from the late 50s as the park was being deeded to the city and planned, there were reports of Native American burial sites in the park, and or Native American burial sites being dug up and relocated into the park. But the record's not real specific on if that happened, where that happened, and any details are all missing. And so we actually had the state archaeologist, Robert Horde, come out last fall, and he did a walk around the park and kind of investigated those areas where he thought would be most likely for burial sites to have been, which is typically in the Flint Hills on ridgetops overlooking waterways. And so he and one of his colleagues walked around and didn't find anything that suggested there were sites there. He said they're not to rule them out, but he said except for the Military Road, they couldn't find evidence of any sites like that in the park today.
Okay. So the City Commission is going to be considering a draft, Alfonso, of the master plan tomorrow, a working draft?
Yeah, it's more of getting some direction where we left off back in November. At a later date, before the end of the year, we'll go back to the City Commission with a draft of the master plan.
Yep.
But for tomorrow, we're looking for more direction, where we want to go with the expansion of the disc golf course and opening up Warner Park Road.
Okay, and that's going to be at 5:30 tomorrow evening in the City Commission room. It'll also be on Facebook Live, and members of the public can certainly come and make public comment after the presentation, and the City Commission has had a chance to ask staff questions.
Yep.
With that, we're going to wrap up our little changed version of Monday in Manhattan, and we hope you enjoyed kind of the tour of the park. Have a good week.